Marie enters her ex-husband's lavish $8 million charity gala, heart-pounding. 17 years earlier, James had publicly humiliated and divorced her after doctors mistakenly labeled her infertile. Tonight, heads turn as she confidently strides in with 4 children whose faces mirror James's unmistakable features. His champagne glass shatters on the marble floor when he spots them. The genetic resemblance is undeniable. The room falls silent as James's perfectly crafted life story begins crumbling before his wealthy donors and business partners. Marie smiles, knowing justice has finally arrived. I met James during our senior year at Northwestern University. We locked eyes across a crowded campus coffee shop, and the chemistry was instant. He was charismatic, ambitious, with piercing blue eyes and a dimpled smile that made my heart race. Within weeks, we were inseparable. By graduation, we were planning our future together. We married when we were both 23, in a ceremony that his wealthy family transformed into the social event of the season. The Prescotts were old money, with connections throughout Chicago's business elite. His father, Richard, ran a financial empire that James was being groomed to inherit. I came from a middle-class background, but had earned my place at Northwestern through scholarships and hard work. James always said my determination was what attracted him most. "You challenge me, Marie," he would say. "You make me want to be better." The pressure for grandchildren began almost immediately after our wedding. At every family dinner, his mother Elizabeth would casually mention her friend's new grandchildren, or ask when we planned to start a family. "The Prescott name must continue," Richard would remind us, swirling his brandy in his crystal glass. "Family legacy is everything in our world." James would squeeze my hand under the table. "We're enjoying being married first," he would answer smoothly. But later that night, he'd talk about how important having children was to him. "I want little versions of us running around," he'd say, tracing circles on my stomach. "Smart like you, stubborn like me. I wanted that too, so after 2 years of marriage, we decided it was time." 6 months passed with no success. Then 12 months. James started tracking my cycle, planning our intimacy like a business strategy. The spontaneity of our relationship began to fade, replaced by scheduled attempts at conception. After 18 months of trying, James scheduled an appointment with a fertility specialist without telling me first. "Dr. Patterson is the best in Chicago," James explained when I confronted him. "My father pulled strings to get us in. Most people wait months." Dr. Gregory Patterson's office screamed luxury, with its leather furniture and original paintings. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "Let's find out what's happening," he said, barely looking up from his tablet as he ordered a battery of tests for both of us. 2 weeks later, we returned for results. Dr. Patterson focused entirely on me, barely acknowledging the folder containing James's test results. "You have severe endometriosis," he told me, his tone clinical. "The scarring is extensive. I'm afraid you're almost certainly infertile, Mrs. Prescott." James's face hardened as Dr. Patterson continued explaining treatment options, none of which he seemed optimistic about. In the car ride home, James was silent, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "We'll get through this," I said, reaching for his hand. He nodded but didn't look at me. The next few weeks, James seemed distracted, working late and avoiding conversations about our future. I found him one night in his home office, researching surrogacy options. "Were you going to talk to me about this?" I asked, hurt that he'd moved forward without including me. "I'm just exploring options," he replied flatly. "We need to be practical." His family's subtle support shifted to barely disguised disappointment. Elizabeth stopped asking about grandchildren, and instead began mentioning how James's cousin had adopted the most darling little girl from somewhere in Europe. James became obsessed with the idea of biological children. "It's important to continue the bloodline," he explained when I suggested adoption. "My father expects it. The family trust is structured around legitimate heirs." I came home early one Thursday afternoon to surprise James with tickets to our favorite band, hoping to recapture some of our early happiness. The bedroom closet door was open, and James was methodically packing his designer suits into expensive luggage. "What are you doing?" I asked, tickets clutched in my suddenly trembling hand. James didn't even startle. He continued folding a shirt with precision. "I was going to tell you tonight. I'm leaving." "Leaving where? On a trip?" I knew even as I asked that wasn't what he meant. "This marriage, Marie." He finally looked at me, his eyes cold in a way I'd never seen. "I deserve a complete wife, someone who can give me children." Complete? The word cut through me like a knife. "I'm not a set of features, James. I'm your wife. And I needed a partner who could fulfill her basic biological function. I've already contacted my lawyer. The paperwork will be ready tomorrow." The room spun as I realized this wasn't an impulsive decision. He'd planned this while sleeping beside me each night, while telling me he loved me. 2 days later, I discovered from our shared credit card statement that he'd consulted divorce attorneys 3 weeks before my diagnosis. He'd been planning his exit before we even knew if I could have children. Our perfect life together hadn't just shattered. It had never existed. The other shoe dropped a week after James moved out. A college friend sent me a photo of James at a restaurant with his executive assistant, Tiffany Moore. They weren't just dining together. His hand rested possessively on her lower back as they waited for their table, her blonde head tilted up toward him, laughing at something he'd said. "I thought you should know," my friend's message read. I stared at the image until my phone screen went dark. Tiffany had worked for James for 2 years. She'd been to our home for dinner parties. I'd sent her a gift basket when her mother died. The divorce filing cited irreconcilable differences, but James's lawyer made sure everyone knew the real reason. Somehow, my private medical information became gossip in their social circles. At a charity luncheon I attended, trying to maintain some normalcy, I overheard 2 women I'd considered friends. "She knew she couldn't have children before they married," one whispered loudly enough for me to hear. James was blindsided. Can you imagine? The lie stunned me into silence. I hadn't known. We both hadn't known. But James was controlling the narrative. 3 weeks after James left, my friend Carolyn called. "I don't know if you've heard," she said, her voice gentle, "but Tiffany is pregnant. 4 months along." The timeline made my stomach lurch. Their affair had started while we were still actively trying to conceive. While I was taking temperatures and tracking cycles, James was creating the family he wanted with someone else. The Prescott family closed ranks around James. Elizabeth, who had once told me she thought of me as a daughter, now ignored my calls. Richard went further, telling mutual friends that I had trapped James into marriage while concealing my condition. Friends I'd had for years suddenly became too busy to meet for coffee. Invitations dried up. The network of connections I'd built through our marriage dissolved overnight. I learned who valued social currency over genuine friendship. Our dream house, a Victorian brownstone we'd spent 2 years renovating together, went to James in the settlement. His lawyers argued successfully that his family had contributed the majority of the down payment, despite the countless hours I'd spent managing the renovation and the fact that I'd given up advancing in my own career to support James's ambitions. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood James would never visit. My financial situation grew precarious. I'd left a promising position at an investment firm to help James launch his business venture, working unpaid as his strategist and planner. Now, at 30 years old, I had a resume gap and no recent professional references. The final divorce hearing should have been straightforward. Our assets had been divided, mostly in James's favor. I just wanted it over with so I could begin rebuilding. But James seemed determined to destroy what little dignity I had left. As the judge reviewed the final paperwork, my lawyer presented evidence we'd recently discovered. "Your Honor, we'd like to submit medical records showing that Mr. Prescott underwent fertility testing 4 months before Mrs. Prescott's diagnosis." James shifted in his seat as my lawyer continued. These records indicate Mr. Prescott was diagnosed with low sperm motility issues, significantly reducing his fertility. He concealed this information from Mrs. Sayce, Prescott, while allowing her to believe she was solely responsible for their inability to conceive. The courtroom fell silent. James's attorney quickly objected, but the judge permitted the evidence. James stood up, his face flushed. "This is ridiculous. She's desperate and pathetic. Everyone knows she's the infertile one." The judge gavelled for order, but the damage was done. James's outburst made the local society page, alongside a photo of him and visibly pregnant Tiffany leaving the courthouse. The article portrayed me as a vindictive ex-wife, throwing last-minute accusations to extract a better settlement. James's PR team made sure his version spread. Articles appeared about the brilliant entrepreneur and his exciting new venture, with mentions of how he'd overcome personal hardships and was now expecting a child with his new partner. I became the bitter ex-wife, a cautionary tale whispered about at social gatherings I was no longer invited to. I stopped reading the news, stopped checking social media, focused on surviving each day, rebuilding from nothing, and trying not to let the injustice consume me. But the seeds of truth had been planted, and like all buried things, they would eventually find their way to light. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I woke at 3 a.m. with abdominal pain so severe I couldn't stand upright. My neighbor Susan drove me to the emergency room, where a young doctor ordered tests and administered pain medication. "This looks like more than standard endometriosis," she said, reviewing my scans. "I'd like to consult with Dr. Carter. She's our best gynecological specialist." Dr. Lindsay Carter arrived an hour later, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She studied my medical records with increasing concern. "Who diagnosed you originally?" she asked. "Dr. Gregory Patterson," I said, watching her expression shift. "I'd like to run additional tests," she said carefully. "Some of these findings don't align with your diagnosis." 2 days later, I sat in Dr. Carter's office as she explained what she'd found. "Marie, you were severely misdiagnosed," she said gently. "You do have endometriosis, but it's moderate, not severe. The pain you experienced was from complications that developed because the condition wasn't properly treated." I struggled to process her words. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that with proper treatment, there's no reason you couldn't conceive," she replied. "The way your condition was characterized to you was, frankly, incompetent at best and negligent at worst." My hands trembled as I wiped away tears. "You mean all this time? You needed surgery to remove the endometrial tissue and medication to manage the condition. I'd like to perform that surgery as soon as possible to address your pain. After recovery, we can discuss your fertility options, if that's something you're interested in." The surgery was scheduled for the following week. As I was being prepped, Dr. Carter mentioned that she'd consulted with a colleague, Dr. Allison Ward, a fertility specialist who wanted to meet with me during my recovery. After successful surgery, Dr. Ward visited my hospital room. She was younger than Dr. Carter, with an energetic presence that filled the small space. "Your prognosis is excellent," she said after introducing herself. "Dr. Carter did beautiful work. Once you're healed, there's no reason you couldn't try to conceive with assistance." "I'm divorced," I said flatly, "and not currently dating. Children aren't in my immediate future." Dr. Ward nodded. "I understand, but I noticed something in your records I thought you should know. You and your ex-husband underwent fertility testing at Patterson Reproductive Associates, correct?" "Yes, about a year ago. Your records indicate samples were preserved for potential treatment. According to our database, those samples are still stored at the clinic." My heart raced. I assumed they'd be destroyed after the divorce. "Actually, the consent forms you both signed give either party continued rights to stored genetic material unless explicitly revoked. Your ex-husband never filed revocation paperwork." Later that night, Unable to sleep, I pulled up the clinic website on my phone. Dr. Gregory Patterson's biography mentioned his long-standing relationship with the Prescott Foundation, serving as their medical advisor for over 20 years. A photo showed him receiving an award from Richard Prescott, James's father. The connection was unmistakable. Patterson and the Prescott family had known each other long before I entered the picture. Had my diagnosis been influenced by that relationship? Had James known what Patterson would say before we even walked into his office? During my follow-up appointment with Dr. Ward, I asked about my options. Legally, you have the right to use the stored samples, she confirmed. Ethically, it's a complex situation, but the consent forms are clear. Both parties agreed that either could use the preserved genetic material for conception, regardless of marital status. I spent weeks contemplating the decision, weighing morality, legality, and my own desires. James had taken so much from me, destroyed my reputation, and built his new life on a foundation of lies. Part of me wanted justice, but another part simply wanted the family I'd always dreamed of. In the end, I decided to proceed with IVF using the stored samples. The legal department at Dr. Ward's clinic confirmed my rights, and the procedure was scheduled. I told no one except Dr. Ward, who supported my decision with professional discretion. Given your excellent surgical outcome and the quality of the preserved samples, I'm cautiously optimistic, she told me, as we prepared for the embryo transfer. Although I should mention that the sperm motility issues noted in the records might reduce our success rate, the first cycle didn't take, nor did the second. But the third transfer resulted in a positive pregnancy test, and subsequent ultrasound revealed not one but two strong heartbeats, twins. As my body changed to accommodate the new lives growing inside me, I began rebuilding my professional life as well. I reached out to former colleagues at the investment firm, securing part-time consulting work I could do remotely. I moved to a larger apartment in a family-friendly neighborhood, far from the social circles that had rejected me. I was 5 months pregnant when a routine search for information about pregnancy complications led me to an article featuring Dr. Patterson. It was a profile in a medical journal with a sidebar about his family connections. Among the notable patients he'd treated were generations of the Prescott family, including childhood friend James Prescott. The pieces clicked together. Patterson hadn't just been the Prescott family's doctor, he'd been James's friend since childhood. My diagnosis hadn't been a medical opinion. It had been a favor to a friend who wanted out of his marriage. The betrayal cut deep, but I refused to let it poison the joy of my pregnancy. James had moved on with Tiffany and their child. I would focus on my future with my twins, the family I'd been told I could never have. The truth would eventually come to light, but for now, I had two precious reasons to look forward rather than back. The twins arrived on a snowy January morning, two perfect boys with downy hair and tiny fingers that wrapped tightly around mine. I named them Jackson and Ethan, names I'd always loved that carried no connection to James or his family. As they grew from newborns to infants, their resemblance to James became undeniable. They had his dimpled smile, his piercing blue eyes, the cowlick at the crown that made their hair stand up in the same stubborn wave. I both treasured and feared these similarities, evidence of their parentage that would one day require explanation. Motherhood was exhausting and exhilarating, made more challenging by my single status. I worked from home, building my client base during nap time and after bedtime. My elderly neighbor Susan helped occasionally, but I needed more support. An unexpected message arrived via social media from Stephanie Taylor, my roommate from freshman year of college. We'd lost touch after graduation, but she'd moved to Chicago for a job and was reaching out to reconnect. Over coffee, while the twins napped in their stroller, our friendship rekindled instantly. Stephanie was now a successful architect, divorced and childless by choice, with a pragmatic outlook and wicked sense of humor that balanced my more serious nature. My brother Adam just moved here too, she mentioned during our second meet up. He's great with kids. Used to teach elementary school before switching to educational software development. Works from home mostly. If you ever need backup childcare. Adam turned out to be my salvation. Tall and easygoing, with kind brown eyes and infinite patience, he started helping once a week, then twice, eventually becoming a regular fixture in our lives. The twins adored him, and he seemed equally taken with them, never questioning their parentage or my single motherhood. Meanwhile, I followed James's rising career through industry news. His tech venture had taken off, with major investment from his father's connections. Photos showed him at galas and business functions, Tiffany on his arm, their daughter Emily always perfectly dressed in coordinating outfits. They projected the perfect family image I once thought we would create together. My own life took an unexpected turn when my grandmother passed away, leaving me her modest savings and a small investment portfolio. The inheritance wasn't vast by Prescott standards, but it was enough to launch the business I'd been planning. Marie Winters Financial Consulting specialized in helping women achieve financial independence, particularly after major life transitions like divorce or widowhood. The business grew steadily, my client list expanding through word of mouth and carefully targeted marketing. I hired an assistant, then a junior consultant. We moved to a comfortable 3-bedroom house in a good school district, with a home office and yard for the boys to play in. Adam's visits became longer, our friendship deepening into something more. He never pressured me, understanding the trust issues left by James's betrayal. He simply showed up, reliable and caring, becoming part of our family's rhythm. On the twins' 3rd birthday, after the party guests had gone home, and the boys were asleep surrounded by new toys, Adam helped me clean up the kitchen. "They're amazing kids, Marie," he said, drying a plate I'd just washed. "You've done an incredible job with them." "I couldn't have managed without you," I admitted, passing him another plate. Our fingers touched, and neither of us pulled away. That night, our relationship evolved from friendship to romance, as natural as the changing seasons. 2 years later, I experienced familiar symptoms and confirmed my suspicion with a home test. Pregnant again. The doctor's appointment revealed another surprise. Twins again, this time fraternal. Adam was ecstatic, immediately talking about room arrangements and double strollers. "But this time you won't be doing it alone," he promised, his hand protectively covering mine. We married in a simple ceremony with Stephanie as my maid of honor, and the boys as ring bearers. Adam's parents embracing my twins as their grandchildren without question. Our daughters, Lily and Grace, arrived 4 months later, completing our family of 6. While my personal life blossomed, my business continued to thrive. I expanded services to include retirement planning and investment strategies. My client base grew from individuals to small businesses and nonprofits. During a routine market research project, I discovered something disturbing. James's now famous company, Prescott Innovations, had launched a financial advisory division targeting women entrepreneurs. Their service model, marketing approach, and even their tagline seemed familiar. Too familiar. I pulled out my original business plan, created years earlier when James and I were still married. The similarities were undeniable. James had taken my concepts, the ones I'd shared with him during late-night strategy sessions, and implemented them on a grander scale, backed by his family's wealth and connections. He hadn't just stolen my chance at motherhood through lies. He'd stolen my business ideas, too. The discovery reignited the sense of injustice I'd worked so hard to overcome, but I had no recourse. No proof that the ideas had been mine first. Just another example of James taking what wasn't his and profiting from it. I channeled that frustration into growing my business further, developing innovative approaches that differentiated my firm from Prescott's corporate offering. My authentic understanding of women's financial concerns gave me an edge that James's slick marketing couldn't match. Our blended family settled into a happy routine. Adam legally adopted Jackson and Ethan when they turned 7, with no objection from James, who remained unaware of their existence. The boys called Adam Dad, and he embraced the role fully, attending every soccer game and science fair, teaching them to ride bikes and program simple computer games. From the outside, we were the perfect modern family. But I knew a reckoning would eventually come. Secrets like interest compound over time. And the day would arrive when the full truth would need to be paid in full. 8 years passed in a blur of school projects, family vacations, and business milestones. My firm now employed 12 people and managed assets for clients across 3 states. Adam's educational software company had been acquired by a larger tech firm, allowing him flexible work arrangements that accommodated our busy family life. Jackson and Ethan, now 15, had grown into thoughtful, intelligent teenagers with their father's analytical mind and my determination. Their younger sisters, Lily and Grace, 7 years old and inseparable, balanced the family dynamic with their artistic temperaments and boundless energy. The questions about biological parentage began gradually. Ethan noticed the differences first, observing that he and Jackson didn't share the same features as their sisters. "We have blue eyes, they have brown," he pointed out one evening while helping me prepare dinner. "And our hair does this weird thing in front that theirs doesn't." He demonstrated the cowlick that was an unmistakable Prescott trait. "That's because you have a different biological father than they do," I explained, having prepared for this conversation for years. "Adam is their biological dad, and he adopted you and Jackson when you were 7. You know that. But who is our biological father?" Jackson asked, entering the kitchen in time to hear the explanation. "You always say you'll tell us when we're older. We're 15 now, Mom." I promised them a family discussion that weekend, with Adam present. But fate intervened before that conversation could occur. Jackson developed severe abdominal pain and fatigue that prompted a visit to the pediatrician. Initial tests led to a referral to a specialist who diagnosed him with a rare genetic condition affecting his liver function. "This condition has a strong hereditary component," Dr. Michaels explained during our consultation. "It typically passes through the paternal line. It would be helpful to know if there's a family history." Adam provided his medical history, but as we expected, the genetic markers didn't match. It was time to contact James. I hadn't spoken to him in 17 years, but his presence had grown in the business world. James Prescott was now a billionaire, his tech company having gone public 5 years earlier. He'd diversified into philanthropy, with the Prescott Foundation funding medical research, educational initiatives, and social programs that garnered positive press and prestigious awards. I found his contact information through his company website and composed a carefully worded email explaining the medical situation without revealing the boy's relationship to him. I requested family medical history for a related party with a potential genetic connection, citing the urgent health concern. The response came not from James, but from his legal team, a coldly worded cease and desist letter threatening action if I attempted further contact. They characterized my inquiry as attempted fraud and harassment of a public figure. The dismissal was infuriating, but not surprising. With Jackson's health at stake, I needed another approach. I hired private investigator Frank Morgan, a former healthcare fraud investigator recommended by a client. "I need information about James Prescott's family medical history," I explained during our initial consultation. "Specifically, any liver or genetic disorders that might have been documented." Frank was thorough and discreet. Within 2 weeks, he'd compiled a comprehensive report on the Prescott family's medical background, including records indicating James's paternal grandfather had suffered from the same condition as Jackson. But Frank had discovered something else, something that shifted everything I thought I knew about my past. "I found these while searching medical databases," Frank said, sliding a folder across the table at our follow-up meeting. "Their fertility test results for James Prescott dated 3 months before your marriage." The records showed James had known about his low sperm motility issues before we wed, before we even began trying to conceive. He'd been aware of his fertility challenges all along, yet had allowed me to believe I was solely responsible for our inability to have children. "There's more," Frank continued, his expression grave. "I traced financial transactions between James Prescott and Dr. Gregory Patterson spanning several years. Large payments classified as consulting fees began the month before your fertility testing and continued until shortly after your divorce was finalized." The implication was clear. James had paid Patterson to manipulate my diagnosis, creating a pretext for ending our marriage when he'd already begun his relationship with Tiffany. Why would he go to such lengths? I wondered aloud. He could have simply divorced me. The Prescott family prenuptial agreement included a fidelity clause, Frank explained. If James initiated divorce due to his own infidelity, the financial settlement would have been significantly more favorable to you. By establishing medical grounds related to your fertility, he circumvented that clause. The calculated cruelty of the deception staggered me. James hadn't just lied. He'd orchestrated an elaborate medical fraud to avoid financial consequences, destroying my reputation and self-worth in the process. Frank had one final revelation. While investigating the financial connections, I uncovered irregularities in the Prescott Foundation's accounts. Large sums designated for research grants have been diverted to offshore holdings controlled by James personally. Classic embezzlement pattern. Very sophisticated, but detectable once you know what to look for. I left Frank's office with a storm of emotions. Anger at James's deception. Vindication that my instincts had been correct. Concern for Jackson's health now that we had confirmation of the genetic link. But, most powerfully, a sense that justice had been deferred, but not denied. That evening, I sat with Adam after the children were in bed, sharing everything Frank had discovered. "What are you going to do with this information?" he asked, his expression concerned but supportive. "First, get Jackson the treatment he needs based on the family medical history," I replied. Then, I paused, considering the possibilities. James has built his current reputation on lies. The philanthropist, the family man, the business visionary. None of it is genuine. Adam squeezed my hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. But remember, any public confrontation will affect the boys too." He was right, of course. Any action I took needed to prioritize my children's well-being. But as I followed news of James's increasingly public profile, another opportunity emerged. An announcement appeared in the business press. James Prescott's foundation would host its annual charity gala in 3 months, an $8 million event bringing together elite donors, business leaders, and politicians. The gala would feature the presentation of the foundation's Medical Visionary Award to none other than Dr. Gregory Patterson for his groundbreaking work in reproductive medicine. The perfect stage had been set. Now I needed to prepare for the final act in this long-delayed drama of truth and consequences. The Prescott Foundation's annual gala was the social event of the season, with tables selling for $50,000 and a waiting list of wealthy aspirants hoping for cancellations. Security would be tight, the guest list closely monitored. I needed inside help. Through careful research, I located Whitney Prescott, James's younger sister. We'd been friendly during my marriage, though she'd been in college then, and our interactions limited. Unlike the rest of the Prescott family, Whitney hadn't publicly participated in the character assassination that followed my divorce. I sent a carefully worded email requesting a meeting about a family matter requiring discretion. To my surprise, she agreed immediately, suggesting a quiet cafe outside the city. Whitney had aged well, her features softer than James's, but with the same striking blue eyes. She seemed guarded initially, studying me across the table. "You look good, Marie," she said finally. "Successful." "Thank you. You as well." I took a deep breath. "I appreciate you meeting me. What I have to share might be difficult to hear." Over the next hour, I explained everything. The false diagnosis, James's prior knowledge of his own fertility issues, the payments to Dr. Patterson, and most importantly, the existence of Jackson and Ethan. I showed her photos on my phone, and she gasped at the unmistakable Prescott features. "They look exactly like James at that age," she whispered. "There's no question." "Jackson has been diagnosed with Prescott syndrome," I added, using the rare condition's colloquial name. We needed family medical history, but James refused contact. Whitney's expression hardened. "That sounds like my brother. Appearance is everything, consequences are for other people." She hesitated before continuing. "You should know James and Tiffany's marriage has been troubled for years. He's had numerous affairs, just like with you. She stays for their daughter and the lifestyle." "I'm not interested in their marriage," I clarified. "I need access to the Gala to confront James privately about the boys. Jackson needs specialized treatment that insurance won't fully cover without documented genetic connection." Whitney studied me, clearly weighing her loyalty to her family against what she'd just learned. "There's something you should know before you decide how to proceed," she said finally. "After your divorce, when rumors about your fertility issues were circulating, I questioned James. The story didn't add up. I knew how desperately he wanted children." She took a sip of water before continuing. "I went to our father with my concerns. He had his own medical team review your records. They concluded your condition was treatable and unlikely to cause permanent infertility. When father confronted James, he admitted paying Patterson to exaggerate your diagnosis." "Your father knew?" I was stunned. "But he supported James publicly, spread rumors about me." "Publicly, yes. Family image above all." Whitney's mouth twisted bitterly. Privately, he was furious. He changed his will, leaving James only the legally required minimum. The bulk of the Prescott fortune was redirected to a trust for legitimate heirs. But James runs the foundation, the business empire. On borrowed legitimacy and falsified documents, Whitney finished. After father died 5 years ago, James presented paperwork showing father had reconciled with him and restored his inheritance. The documents were convincing enough that the executors didn't challenge them, but they were forgeries. James has been systematically draining the family trusts meant for future generations. The revelation aligned with Frank's findings about financial irregularities. James hadn't just defrauded me. He'd defrauded his entire family. "I can get you into the Gala," Whitney said decisively. "Not just you. Your sons as well. It's time the truth came out, for everyone's sake." Over the next weeks, Whitney provided insider information about the Gala's security procedures and schedule. She secured invitations for me and my family through her allocation as a Prescott. We developed a plan for a private confrontation with James, with Whitney present to support the boys' claim to Prescott medical benefits. Frank continued building our case, documenting the financial trail connecting James to Patterson and uncovering additional evidence of foundation funds being misappropriated. He created a secure digital package of evidence that could be shared with board members if necessary. At home, I had difficult but necessary conversations with Jackson and Ethan, explaining their biological parentage and the circumstances surrounding their conception. They processed the information differently. Jackson quiet and thoughtful, Ethan angry on my behalf. "He lied about you being able to have kids, then left you for someone else, and now he's getting some big award with the doctor who helped him lie?" Ethan summarized, indignant. "That's messed up." "It was wrong," I agreed. "But it led me to Adam and your sisters. Sometimes life's worst moments create paths to our greatest joys." Adam supported the plan, while ensuring the boys understood they were under no obligation to establish a relationship with James. "I'm your dad in all the ways that matter," he told them. "Nothing changes that. This is about getting Jackson the medical recognition he needs, and clearing your mom's name." The night before the gala, an unexpected email arrived from an anonymous account. The message contained detailed financial records of the Prescott Foundation, showing systematic diversion of funds to private accounts. A brief note read, "For Marie Winters, use as needed. He's doing to me what he did to you, Tiffany. James's wife had apparently discovered his latest betrayal and was ensuring his comeuppance. The additional evidence completed our case, providing verification from an insider that would be difficult to dismiss. As I laid out my gala outfit that evening, a simple but elegant black dress that projected confidence without ostentation, I reflected on the 17-year journey from devastated ex-wife to the woman I'd become. James had meant to destroy me. Instead, his actions had forced me to build a stronger, more authentic life than I might have had with him. Tomorrow would bring a reckoning long overdue. Justice for me, medical support for Jackson, and truth for the Prescott family who had been deceived by the man they'd trusted to carry their legacy forward. The Prescott Foundation Gala transformed the grand ballroom of the Lakeside Hotel into a shimmering display of wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers reflected in polished marble floors, ice sculptures dripped elegantly at food stations, and Chicago's elite circulated in designer finery, air, kissing, and networking over champagne that cost more per bottle than many people earned in a week. I entered with Jackson and Ethan flanking me, both handsome in their first tuxedos. We'd left Adam home with Lily and Grace, deciding that my younger daughters should be shielded from potential drama. Whitney met us in the lobby, elegant in midnight blue, her expression a mixture of determination and anxiety. "James and Tiffany are doing the receiving line near the main entrance," she murmured, guiding us toward a side door. "Dr. Patterson is already inside, talking with board members. The award presentation is scheduled for 9. We slipped into the ballroom discreetly, but discretion proved impossible. The boys' presence created an immediate sensation. Conversations halted mid-sentence as guests noticed the two teenagers whose faces reflected James Prescott's features with mirror-like precision. The resemblance was so striking that whispers began instantly, spreading through the crowd like ripples in a pond. James was across the room, champagne glass in hand, laughing with a group of admirers. Tiffany stood slightly apart, slim and polished in designer gold, her smile fixed, but her eyes scanning the room restlessly. Their daughter Emily, now 16, looked bored beside her mother, absorbed in her phone. The moment James spotted us froze in perfect clarity. His eyes widened, the champagne glass slipping from his fingers to shatter on the marble floor. The crash drew more attention, more stares, more whispers. Tiffany followed her husband's gaze, her practiced smile faltering as she registered the two boys who could only be Prescott's. Emily looked up from her phone, mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. James recovered quickly, summoning security with a subtle gesture. Two men in dark suits moved toward us, but Whitney intercepted them. "They're my guests," she said, loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "My nephews are attending their first Prescott event." The word nephews rippled through the crowd. James pushed through guests toward us, his face flushed with anger beneath his practiced charm. "What is this?" he hissed when he reached us, smile still fixed for onlookers. "Some kind of pathetic stunt?" Before I could respond, Whitney placed her hands on the boy's shoulders. "James, meet Jackson and Ethan Winters, your biological sons." James's face went from red to white. "That's impossible. You were infertile." "No, James. You paid Dr. Patterson to say I was infertile. I had a treatable condition, as your father discovered when he had my medical records reviewed." James flinched at the mention of his father. "These boys cannot be mine. This is extortion." "We don't want your money," Jackson said quietly, speaking for the first time. His resemblance to James was even more pronounced when he spoke. The same cadence, the same slight lift of the right eyebrow. "I have a genetic condition, Prescott syndrome. I need access to the family medical history and treatment program." "This is absurd," James sputtered, but his voice lacked conviction as he stared at Jackson's face, his own features reflected back with undeniable clarity. Tiffany had approached during the exchange, Emily trailing behind her. "They're yours," she said flatly. "Anyone with eyes can see that." You knew I had samples stored, I explained. You never revoked consent. Legally, they're your biological children. Whitney stepped forward. Father changed his will after he learned what you did, James. These boys are legitimate Prescott heirs. They're entitled to their share of the family trust you've been illegally accessing. James's face contorted. You have no proof of any of this. Actually, we do. Frank Morgan appeared beside us, having entered as a regular guest. Financial records showing payments to Dr. Patterson. Medical records showing you knew about your fertility issues before marriage. Documentation of fund diversion from the foundation. Would you like me to share these with your board members? He gestured toward the group of distinguished individuals watching our confrontation with increasing interest. Dr. Patterson had gravitated toward the disturbance, recognition, and alarm crossing his face as he saw me. I acknowledged him with a cold nod. Perhaps Dr. Patterson would like to explain why he falsified medical records in exchange for consulting fees, I suggested loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Patterson blanched. I never falsified anything, he protested weakly. The payment records suggest otherwise, Frank replied. The Medical Ethics Board would find them quite interesting, as would the licensing board. James grabbed my arm, fingers digging painfully. You're ruining everything. Ethan stepped between us, removing James's hand from my arm with surprising strength. Don't touch my mother, he said, voice low but intense. The confrontation had drawn the attention of the entire ballroom. Whitney seized the moment, raising her voice to address the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce my nephews, Jackson and Ethan Winters. They are James's biological sons, though he's denied their existence and their medical needs. They represent the truth behind the Prescott Foundation's glossy image. Gasps and murmurs swept through the crowd. Several board members approached, grave-faced, requesting immediate clarification. James attempted damage control, dismissing the claims as a desperate ploy for attention, but the evidence was literally standing before them in the form of two teenagers whose Prescott heritage was unmistakable. Dr. Patterson, seeing the tide turning, made a strategic decision. There may have been some miscommunication regarding Mrs. Winters' diagnosis, he admitted reluctantly. Perhaps a review of the records is warranted. The Foundation's legal counsel appeared, requesting a private meeting with all parties involved. As we moved toward a conference room off the main ballroom, Tiffany surprised everyone by handing a flash drive to the lead attorney. Financial records? She said simply. Everything you need to audit the Foundation's actual disbursements versus reported grants. I've been gathering evidence for years. James stared at his wife in disbelief. You too? You've been unfaithful since the beginning, she replied coolly. Did you think I wouldn't protect myself and Emily? The next 2 hours passed in tense discussion as evidence was reviewed, accusations addressed, and implications considered. The board members present were particularly disturbed by the financial documentation showing systematic embezzlement from charitable funds. This requires immediate action, the board chairman stated. James, I'm afraid we'll need your resignation from all foundation positions, effective immediately. The legal ramifications will be addressed separately. Faced with irrefutable evidence and abandonment by his allies, James had no choice but to comply. His carefully constructed empire was crumbling around him, the truth finally emerging after 17 years of deception. As the private meeting concluded, I requested a moment alone with James. The others filed out, leaving us face to face for the first time since our divorce. Was any of it real? I asked quietly. Did you ever actually love me? James looked suddenly older, the charm and confidence stripped away. I loved the idea of you, he admitted. The perfect wife for the life I thought I wanted. When that illusion crumbled, I took the easy way out. And now? Looking at your sons? He glanced toward the door where Jackson and Ethan waited. They seem like good kids. You did well. He hesitated. I'm not father material, never was. They're better off with the life you gave them. Jackson needs specialized treatment. The Prescott Medical Trust has resources specific to his condition. James nodded. I'll make sure he has access. They both will. It's the least I can do. We returned to the ballroom, where Whitney had taken charge, addressing the confused guests with remarkable poise. She introduced me, inviting me to speak. Standing at the podium where James had expected to present his fraudulent award, I surveyed the crowd of privileged, powerful people who had once judged and dismissed me. 17 years ago, I was told I couldn't have children, I began. That lie destroyed my marriage, my reputation, and temporarily, my sense of self-worth. But it also set me on a path to discover my own strength and build a life based on truth rather than appearances. I spoke about resilience, about how sometimes losing what you think you want opens the door to what you truly need. I announced the creation of a new foundation dedicated to supporting women facing fertility challenges, ensuring they received accurate information and comprehensive care. Tonight wasn't meant to destroy, but to correct, I concluded. To replace lies with truth, injustice with accountability, and most importantly, to secure proper medical care for my son, who proudly carries the Prescott genetic legacy, including its challenges. The response was unexpected. Whitney led the applause, followed by foundation board members, and then the entire gathering. Several prominent donors approached afterward, offering support for my new foundation. Dr. Carter and Dr. Ward, whom I'd invited as my guests, were surrounded by medical professionals eager to discuss their ethical approach to reproductive medicine. In the aftermath, Jackson received access to the specialized treatment program developed specifically for Prescott syndrome. The Foundation Board launched a full audit, with James facing potential criminal charges for financial misconduct. Dr. Patterson surrendered his medical license rather than face an ethics investigation. James resigned from his company leadership positions, the scandal decimating the stock price and his personal wealth. The truth about our divorce emerged, vindicating me in the social circles that had once rejected me based on lies. Whitney and I developed a genuine friendship, her relationship with her nephews growing naturally over time. Tiffany filed for divorce, securing her and Emily's future through careful legal preparation. Emily, after initial shock, became curious about her half-brothers, leading to cautious but developing relationships. My business expanded further, with clients seeking not just financial advice, but the resilient strategies that had helped me rebuild after devastating setback. Adam continued as the steady, loving presence that anchored our family, his relationship with the boys unaffected by the revelations about their biological father. 1 year after the gala, we gathered at home to celebrate Jackson's recovery following successful treatment. Our blended, complicated, wonderful family filled the backyard with laughter and conversation. Whitney brought her new boyfriend. Stephanie teased Adam about going gray. Lily and Grace performed a dance routine they'd choreographed. Jackson and Ethan argued good-naturedly about college plans. Watching them, I reflected on the strange, winding path that had brought us here. James had meant his lies to diminish me, to justify discarding me for a more advantageous match. Instead, those very lies had ultimately created this moment, this family, this life that exceeded any dreams I'd had during my marriage. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the greatest blessings. Sometimes what seems like an ending is merely the first step on a better journey. And sometimes, justice arrives not in a thunderclap of immediate retribution, but in the quiet accumulation of truth that cannot, eventually, be denied. If you've experienced betrayal or injustice in your life, remember that your story isn't over. The final chapter belongs to those who persist, who rebuild, who refuse to let others define their worth or limit their possibilities. The most powerful response to those who try to diminish you is to grow beyond anything they could have imagined. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your story in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others find hope in difficult times. Thank you for listening, and remember that your greatest chapters may still be waiting to be written.